started?
Yep.
Well, welcome to this webinar to present the rules updates to the Europe region. Your presentation panel for tonight is myself as chair of the Rules Advisory Panel, John O'Bradin, who is also on the Rules Advisory Panel, and we're being joined by Felicity O'Leary, who's presenting on behalf of the World Netball Technical Officials Panel, and Felicity also represents the Europe Netball Technical Officials Working Group. We've also invited all of the Europe Netball Technical Officials Working Group to join us this evening. The 2024 Rules of Netball have been circulated to all member countries and international officials, and the print version is available for members now from World Netball. We are scheduling a series of webinars over the next 6 days, which will include World Netball officials. We held that this morning. Well, this morning my time, the evening Jono's time. Members and regions, and then we will finish with our media partners. We are recording this session for distribution, but we'll exclude any of the Q&A at the end of the session. And if you have questions, could you either put them in the chat or save them till the end of the meeting, and we will discuss those if we have sufficient time at the end. Otherwise, we'll ask you to send them in after the webinar is finished. Next. So the agenda for this evening, our webinar should last about 90 minutes. We're going to recap the rules review principles, the overarching principles which guided us. We present a summary of the key rule changes, and that will include educational resource videos and some further details that we'll share with you. We'll also go through some additional rules changes, which we don't consider to be key, but we want to make you aware of. We have some updated umpire hand signals that we'll show you and talk you through. And then we'll present our rollout plan. Following that, we'll invite Felicity to present the technical officials manual changes. And then at the end, we'll go on to questions. So you may have seen this slide before, but the overarching principles for the rules review. As part of the rules review process and writing the rules book, the Rules Advisory Panel worked closely with the Coaching Advisory Panel in a highly collaborative approach. An influential factor was to ensure the spectacle of our game, which recognises the dynamic and aerial nature, the contest and athleticism to push boundaries in performance excellence, and to ensure this is maintained. Our game can only move on if all experts, coaches, umpires and players collaborate, challenge each other and actively work together to find solutions to benefit netball. Our challenge was to produce a rules book that provided simply written rules that gave clear definition and interpretation to support consistent application across the netball world. Player safety was a key priority and at the forefront of all discussion, notwithstanding the importance of players self-regulating their behaviour on court. This collaborative approach utilised expertise from umpiring and coaching to reframe game management and other rules which permit and support a fair contest. Ultimately, netball will retain its uniqueness and dynamic features as a result of the updated rules. Other principles, we wanted to ensure that the rules book reflected modern, forward-thinking organisations. So we've restructured the layout to simplify and improve the flow of the rules. We wanted one single source of the truth. So, you could go to the rule book and get the factual evidence, the factual rule. All the protocols and guidelines that were in the appendices in the previous rules book has now been absorbed against the relevant rule. And we want the rules book to be easy to use for not just umpires, but anybody involved in netball, including all our stakeholders. We also wanted to ensure that the rule covered all the scenarios to remove any ambiguity. And during the last 4 years, we have had rules questions. So we've tried to embed the interpretation into the updated rules. At the front of the rules book, there are a number of newer definitions and updated definitions from the previous rules book, which we would suggest you study carefully, because that helps you to understand some of the rules that are detailed later on in the rules book. And we've included an updated hand signals. And against each rule, we've listed the sanction and also the terminology to be used. So that should be an aid to the umpires and also help players and coaches understand what the terminology will be for a particular infringement or action. And
Cool.
Jono, over to you for the tactical changes.
Thanks, Cheryl. Good evening, my European friends. It's obviously morning over here in New Zealand. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Rules Advisory Panel, we're really excited to share not just these changes with you, but today you'll be getting a first glance at some of the educational material that we've put together to support our member countries in rolling these rule changes out throughout their competitions. There's going to be a series of 12 main rules we're going to cover today. Each will have an accompanying video clip. These will be publicly available on World Netball digital channels, YouTube, and in the app, but we'll talk about that a little bit more towards the back of the webinar. So the first change we're going to talk about today is tactical changes. So I'm going to play the video for you now, and then I will provide some summary and some additional information at the end. So hopefully my technology works.
Faking an injury to make a substitution? Not anymore. The new rule means teams no longer have to fake an injury to make a substitution or a team change during play. They can simply request a tactical change immediately after a goal has been scored. A team change is when an on-court player changes their playing position with another on-court player. A substitution is when a player moves from the team bench to replace another player on the court. There are 3 times you can make substitutions and or team changes. 1, at an interval. 2, at an injury or illness or blood stoppage. Or now, immediately after a goal has been scored. This is considered a tactical change, and umpires will use this hand signal to differentiate it from another stoppage for injury or illness, blood, or game management action.
Step 1. An on-court player has to ask the umpire to hold time. Step 2. Quickly change positions. Step 3. Play restarts. Tactical changes must be made without delay to ensure that the umpire is able to restart play quickly so the momentum of the match is not affected. Any players moving position or leaving or joining the court must do so quickly. If too much time is taken, the team will be penalised. In individually timed games, time will be held for the changes. This will not be possible in centrally timed games, but teams will still need to complete changes efficiently so that they're not penalised for delaying. Tactical changes may be made by both the requesting team and the opposing team. While you have a right to make as many changes as you like, if the number of changes is becoming too disruptive to play, the umpire can refuse to allow them, or even penalise the team for delaying play. This change will make tactical changes much easier. Enjoy.
I could almost read these scripts off by heart now. So that's the first video, which hopefully explains in a little bit more detail this new notion of a tactical change. It may not come as new news to some of you, because this has been the result of a rules trial in England Super League over the last 2 years. So effectively, the key things to take out of that are as follows. Firstly, the time for a tactical change to occur is immediately after a goal, not at any given time. So a team can request a tactical change immediately after a goal, and this is obviously to limit any disruption. The other important thing to note here is that it's not just the team who is requesting the tactical change that can make those changes. The opposition is also given time or the right to make tactical changes at this exact same stoppage. So we expect this to all happen quite quickly and seamlessly, and as was outlined in the video, we have built in some mechanisms whereby if it's taking either too long or is being abused by teams, it provides the umpires with some tools to assist to make sure this doesn't occur. So overall, hopefully this is a welcome change, and it will certainly hopefully make life easier for players, coaches, and umpires. Just a note, there's no additional changes in relation to what was already there for injury, illness, and blood. Those are still distinct, separate stoppage occurrences under the rules themselves. So this was just in relation to the tactical changes. The next video clip is in relation to scoring a goal.
Buzzer beaters. We all love them, but how do you know if the goal counts? In the past, the ball had to pass completely through the ring before the whistle to be counted. Now, if the whistle to end play or to hold time is blown after the ball has left the hands of the shooter and the shot is successful, the goal will be scored. If the shot is unsuccessful, there's only two reasons that the penalty pass will be awarded for an infringement after the ball has left their hands. Either if a defending player has caused the goalpost to move, which interferes with the shot, or if they deflect the ball on its downwards path towards the ring.
The reason for this change is that it's easier for the umpire to assess whether the ball has left the player's hands when time is blown and signalled than to assess whether the ball has passed wholly and completely through the ring. In the situation where a penalty has been awarded and then the timekeeper signals for time, umpire will blow the whistle for time and then advise the players that the penalty can be taken. If this occurs at the end of a period of play, play will be extended for the penalty pass to be taken, including any subsequent infringements at that penalty pass. Can't wait to see more buzzer beaters.
That's about the extent of humour you get in these videos, I'm afraid, team. So in relation to the scoring of the goal, this change here is that in the past where the ball had to be completely through the ring for a goal to be counted when time is blown, we've moved the position of the umpire's assessment from that to the ball having been released from the goal attack or goal shooter's hands. So as was outlined, we feel that this will be an easier assessment for the umpires to make in what is quite a game-defining decision, given that their vision will be at court level or should be at court level anyway, rather than them looking up 10 feet in the air. So this will hopefully add a layer of excitement to the end of a match. But again, the emphasis will still be on the umpires making an accurate decision, but we just feel the chance of this is enhanced by this rule change. As was noted there, for those of you who are interested, Rule 9 is where we outline scoring the goal in the new rules book, and it does pay to look at those examples where if there was a subsequent infringement after the ball's been released, what would result in a further sanction being awarded and what wouldn't. That sits in Rule 9.7. So have a look at that. The next clip is going to be about centre passes, and I'll play it and then I'll explain a little bit more detail.
In the game of netball, the team taking the centre pass alternates throughout. Most umpires use a hair tie or a band on their hand to keep track of whose pass it is, because we're all human and we can all make mistakes. We've made some changes to make sure we get all the centre passes correct. After a goal is scored, both umpires and the reserve umpire, if there is one, indicate the direction of the centre pass with their arm, and the controlling umpire calls the name of the team who is taking the next centre pass. If the umpires disagree or are in any way unsure, the umpires must seek clarification from the scorers. If both umpires indicate the centre pass direction incorrectly, the scorers notify the umpires prior to the centre pass being taken by talking to them or by electronic means in elite netball.
The updated rule allows an on-court player to appeal to the umpire before the centre pass is taken, if they believe it is being signalled incorrectly. Once the centre pass has been taken, any mistakes cannot be rectified. It's too late. The umpires will then check with the scorers, who will confirm the centre pass and tell the umpires. We've added these extra safeguards to stop errors at the centre pass.
Okay, so the emphasis there is obviously on getting the correct centre pass, because it can make a big difference in a game of netball where the whole premise is around alternating possession. So I think the key takeouts there are obviously first and foremost the umpires should still be working hard to get this correct, but obviously there are times where for whatever reason this doesn't happen. We want umpires, if they are unclear at any time, to stop the match and ask the scorers what the correct centre pass is. That's point one. We've also, at elite level where there's reserve umpires in place, we've also asked them to signal the centre pass, just to provide another check there to make sure that we're all on the same page. But we have now provided the opportunity for an on-court player to request a centre pass check if they believe it's wrong. The teams are very good at knowing whose centre pass it is next, and the times that we've had over recent years where it has been wrong, the teams have actually known. So we have just built in a mechanism now whereby we can have the on-court players requesting a check. The key thing in all of this is if there is errors in the centre pass, they need to be corrected before the centre pass is taken. Once the centre pass is taken, it's then too late. So all these safeguards that we've built in here need to occur between the previous goal being scored and that centre pass being taken. So that's the key thing around this rule change. Now we will share with you the removal of the toss-up.
The good old toss-up, it's gone. A toss-up was previously used when infringements occurred simultaneously, which means at the exact same time. However, due to improved umpire education and training, the use of toss-ups has become much less frequent, and umpires are instead correctly penalising the infringement that occurred first. This means that the skill of the toss-up has been lost for both players and umpires. Although rare, there will still be some occasions when infringements do happen at exactly the same time. So now, if the whistle is blown for a simultaneous infringement, the umpire awards possession to the team that was last in possession of the ball, where the ball was when play stopped. Any player from that team may take the ball for the restart of play. It does not have to be the player who actually had the ball last. This is different to a situation where possession is called as a clarification, where two players gain possession of the ball in quick succession.
Because the new action only applies in the same situations where a toss-up would have been awarded under the previous rules, it is expected that this will not be used frequently. Some moments it might be used are at a centre pass, two opposing players enter the centre third before the whistle, and one or both touch or catch the ball, or for any other mutual infringement.
As the infringements are simultaneous, it is not possible to apply the advantage rule, even though the same team will be awarded possession of the ball.
Remember, we expect this to be used as often as we would have seen a toss-up, so not very often.
Okay, so everyone can get over their period of mourning. Toss-ups are gone. This was as a direct result of member feedback and also umpires, as was kind of outlined there. With better umpire education and training, the instances where toss-ups were being awarded were becoming very infrequent. And in fact, when they were being used, certainly in elite level, because everyone was so out of practice, they weren't necessarily applied accurately or as the rule book outlined. We fully accept that at a grassroots and community level, these do occur more often, but what we've come up with here, we believe, is a way to restart the game quickly without too much of a fuss. So just to reiterate, where there are now instances of simultaneous infringements, or also what we're now calling a mutual infringement, which is defined in those definitions at the front, the ball or possession of the ball will be awarded to the team who last had the ball. So, for example, in the video clip there where you see it was black centre pass and both players broke and the ball was caught by one of those players, the whistle blows because it is an infringement. We can't play advantage on it. There is an infringement by both teams. So the whistle is blown for the simultaneous breaking in that example. And the possession of the ball is awarded to the team black team who had the centre pass because they were last in possession of the ball immediately before that simultaneous infringement. And that is taken where the ball was when play was stopped. and can be taken by anyone in that team. So there is a distinction now in terms of possession, which is outlined obviously in Rule 6. It is an action in its own sense, in addition to what has traditionally been called possession, where two players catch the ball shortly after each other. Obviously, one has a whistle, one doesn't. One can be awarded to any player in that team, whereas the situation with a close possession call, it's the player who actually has the ball that has to take that. Just be mindful that it is possession. So if this does happen and the ball is in the goal circle at the time play is stopped, the team is subsequently allowed to pass or shoot for goal. Next is short pass.
The short pass. Yes, it's always been a rule. We've just changed it a little. It is a fundamental principle of netball that every pass should be capable of being legally contested. The previous wording of the rule was being interpreted in a way that led to the use of passes so short that defenders had no opportunity to even attempt to intercept or gain possession.
The updated rule is, when a player passes the ball, there must be sufficient space on the court for an opposing player to be able to deflect or intercept the ball as it moves from the hands of the passer to those of the receiver. The difference between intercept by a hand and deflect or intercept is that the umpire must consider whether the defending player can make a genuine attempt, considering not just a hand, but a hand connected to an arm and a body. In keeping with the philosophy of netball as a sport for all, the rule refers to the umpire's assessment of the player's actions rather than to body size or shape.
So this rule, short pass, was probably the most submitted on rule in the whole of the rules review, and it was also a point of significant discussion at Congress where we were passing these rule changes. Fundamentally, everyone agrees that the rule as it was being interpreted was not fit for purpose. It was just how we replaced that. So the key change here for all of you to take away today is that we have this notion now whereby there must be room for a defending player to attempt to deflect or intercept the ball. And how that's different from the previous wording is now we're not just talking about a notional hand that can pass through a gap. We're also talking about the hand being attached to the body and the arm of the defending player so they can make a genuine attempt to intercept the ball. So we do expect the distance for short passes to increase from what we've been seeing over recent times. But the main thing there for umpires to assess is, can a defending player genuinely attempt to legally intercept or defend that ball? And obviously this also refers to instances where a throw-in is on the goal line and the ball is thrown against the goalpost. There must be a similar distance on the court for a defending player to be able to intercept or defend that pass. So that's where we've gone to on short pass. We're also going to be monitoring this over the next 12 months to see that the wording that we've got is working as we intended. So we will be communicating with member countries to provide their feedback, instances and video clips of it being umpired well, or some instances where there's a query. We just really want to make sure that, given there was so much desire for this rule to change in its interpretation, that we're achieving the intended outcome there. As Cheryl outlined at the top of the presentation, probably the overriding factor in a lot of our thinking around rule changes is in relation to player safety. So the next couple of slides are going to go through that in some detail. And this initial clip should give you some introductory points, and then we'll move on to the specifics.
Player safety is paramount in netball. We've made some changes in the new rules, most of them to ensure the game of netball is safe and fair. It's important that player safety is taken seriously by players, coaches, and umpires in dealing with injury incidents. Blood, Players who are bleeding, have an open wound or blood-stained clothing must leave the court and be substituted. But we no longer require a player with dried blood on them to be substituted. Players with dried blood are now permitted to clean up quickly and continue playing. This will usually happen while the bleeding player is being substituted or other players or the ball are being checked for blood. However, any clothing that becomes blood-stained must be replaced within the time allowed for the stoppage by the umpires, and this may occur away from the playing enclosure.
We've also made some changes regarding head and neck injuries and suspected concussion. The new rule clarifies that as well as umpires holding time for injury and illness following a verifiable request by an on-court player, the umpire may also hold time without a request being made if there is an obvious or serious injury, which includes an injury to the head or neck and or suspected concussion. At the elite level, we've introduced an independent concussion observer who may, along with a primary care person or team doctor, advise the reserve umpire to ask the umpires to hold time if there is a suspected concussion. In extreme circumstances where player safety is endangered, a primary care person, team doctor, or independent concussion observer may enter the court while play is in progress. Either umpire will then immediately hold time.
So as you'll see there's a number of steps that we've taken in the rules themselves to beef up and modernise our player safety procedures. And obviously this is in recognition of a number of things that are topical in sport at the moment. Obviously, the game of netball is one which is fast, very aerial, and more often than not played on a hard surface. So we have seen increasing incidences where players are hitting their head or neck, and as an organisation, we want to make sure that we're taking the necessary steps to protect the safety and welfares of our players, because obviously we don't want any ongoing side effects from players having head or neck injuries and or suspected concussion. So the independent concussion observer, again, that's defined in the rules themselves, but this is a neutral person organised by the event organisers, and this is obviously at an elite level, whereby they don't have an affiliation with any team, and they can form their own assessment of whether they believe somebody is concussed and needs to be removed from the court for further assessment. The further assessment piece doesn't sit within the rules themselves. The World Netball will issue some protocols in relation to that, but the rules do provide the framework for the initial removal for further observation or assessment. That will be managed through the reserve umpire, which we'll get to a little bit later on. The second thing in relation to that clip was for blood stoppages. So the blood stoppage rule itself has not been changed. Obviously, if a player is actively bleeding or they have blood soaking through their dress, they must leave the court and receive any treatment courtside within that initial 30-second period. What we have done is reflect on the science that sits behind some of the blood injuries in other sports, and we're now saying that if a player just has some dry blood or isn't the player actually actively bleeding or with an open wound, they can have that addressed or cleaned or covered during that initial period where everything else is going on at that blood stoppage, and quickly resume play. The other thing there is that players can now leave the playing enclosure. It was always common sense that we allowed them to do this, but we've now put that in the rules themselves to stop the situation where players are stripping off courtside if they need to change uniform. They can do that in the privacy of the changing rooms or somewhere else. That moves us quite nicely to game management. Given that our paramount consideration was player safety, we needed to turn our attention to rules and sanctions that apply to support this objective. So our significant focus in this area did relate to the overarching rule review principle agreed with the World Netball Board, and that was to overhaul the game management rules to simplify their application and encourage its consistent use. It was felt that game management wasn't necessarily either well understood or being well applied consistently across the world. So they wanted to make sure that that was the case moving forward. We also wanted this notion that players needed to self-regulate and change their behaviour, and not necessarily having to respond to the umpires with a big wooden stick if something was going awry. So really putting the onus back on players to take responsibility for their own actions. We obviously also wanted to address dangerous play to keep players safe. And we also needed to address what was becoming a concern for us, that the number of penalties that were being awarded in some matches was extremely high. And in fact, empirical evidence over the last few years that these numbers are still increasing, despite some of the changes we made in the last rule review. And lastly, I guess in terms of the integrity of the contest, making sure that there's a greater consequence for individuals playing outside the rules while maintaining a safe and fair contest. So we did try and make some changes to the game management provisions last time around 4 years ago, but we're also mindful that the game has continued to evolve. But we did have overwhelming feedback from members that it wasn't quite right. For example, cautions were introduced last time around, but in our view, they were often being either used incorrectly, inconsistently, or probably more importantly, it was only ever meant to be a stepping stone. If behaviour didn't change, there was to be an escalation in game management action, and we didn't necessarily witness this. So it was felt that we needed to provide the umpires, the coaches, and the players with a clearer framework of what happened if they would continue to infringe the foul play rules. And coaches wanted that definitive wording so game management was consistently applied, was less subjective, and that everyone kind of knew what was going to happen next. And this was also catered for, in the assessment of umpires in terms of their effective game management. There's also been a number of examples in elite competition matches over recent years where, as a rules advisory panel, we felt that the correct decision was actually a suspension or an ordering off, and that didn't occur. And obviously the knock-on effect of that is on the integrity of our sport. There has been a traditional view previously that it's the umpire's responsibility to keep all the players on the court, or they've somehow failed. That's not the case at all. It's widely accepted in other sports that if certain behaviour happens, a player will be removed. And why should netball be any different? Because ultimately, we're talking about players taking ownership and self-regulating their own actions. And if certain behaviour occurs, the umpires need to be supported, both on and off the court, in terms of what game management action applies. So it's kind of a bit of a brief intro, but I'll just play this clip now, and that'll hopefully round this topic off.
Game management is crucial to keeping our game safe and fair. Any game management action outlined in the rules is compulsory, not optional. In this video, we'll cover the key changes in the rules and explain the game management process. Cautions have been removed, and we have now added the ability for umpires to advance or escalate a sanction. And players that are ordered off can now be replaced by another player after 4 minutes. Now, let's run through the game management actions. To manage the match, an umpire will use any of the following in addition to penalising infringements. Normally, an umpire will work through these game management actions in order, unless an offence is serious enough to require that a higher level of game management be applied immediately.
Step 1 is for low-level incidents that do not compromise player safety. An umpire can provide proactive advice where a player is provided with specific feedbacks to change their behaviour without the need to hold time. Step 2 is to advance and or escalate the sanction. A sanction may be advanced up to half a third, or about 5 metres. If an infringement is in the goal third, it can be advanced into the goal circle. If it is a penalty pass, the infringer stands out of play at the new position. A free pass may be escalated to a penalty pass, either as a standalone action or in combination with the sanction being advanced. Advancing or escalating a sanction isn't appropriate for infringements that endanger player safety. Instead, the umpire would move straight to step 3, 4, or 5, having regard to the seriousness of the behaviour concerned, the principles of fair play and good sporting behaviour, as well as the paramount consideration of player safety. Step 3 is to warn a player. This lets a player know that if they continue to infringe the foul play rules, they will be suspended. Step 4 is a suspension. The player will be sent from the court for 2 minutes of playing time.
When defence, that's dangerous play, you're suspended for 2 minutes.
After the 2 minutes, the suspended player may return to the court, or the coach may choose to replace them with a different bench player. This is an important change, as it means coaches have more choice, especially if they think the suspended player isn't going to be able to adjust. Step 5 is ordering off, where a player must leave the court and take no further part in the match.
Goal defence, that's highly reckless, dangerous play, you're ordered off.
Key change with this rule is they may now be replaced after 4 minutes of playing time.
It's important to remember that umpires work as a team to control the game. Warnings, suspensions, and ordering off are all immediately binding on the co-umpire. As an example, if one umpire gives a warning and that player continues to infringe the foul play rules at the other umpire's end of the court, they would then suspend the player. A quick reminder on how a warning, suspension, and ordering off is given. Hold time using the hand signal. Use a specific term and hand signal for the game management action. Advise the player of the behaviour the game management action is being applied to.
Okay, so as you'll see, there's quite a lot to take in there. Just drawing your attention to a couple of things that's worth further mention. You'll keep hearing this term player safety. That is actually one of the terms that is defined in the front of the rules book that Cheryl was referring to at the start of the presentation. So that is an example where everyone should be familiar on what we actually mean by that term. It's self-explanatory, but notwithstanding it's outlined there in explicit detail. The new game management rules are hidden at Rule 18 in the new rules book. Unapologetically, this is probably the largest rule in the rule book now, but that reflects the desire of the membership to have pretty clear guidelines in terms of how we want to manage a fixture at all levels. In relation to the ordering off, obviously there's a change there now whereby the ordering off is for a period of 4 minutes as opposed to the rest of the game. So the player is still ordered off for the rest of the match, but the team can choose to replace that player after 4 minutes. So this removes some of the inequity that currently exists with an ordering off, whereby a team can be disadvantaged for a significant period of time in a match, or at varying levels depending on the specific playing position of the player concerned. So hopefully by removing this, it will be less of an impact if these decisions have to be made, albeit if they need to be made, we would expect the umpires to follow through and make those decisions. So we will go on to talk about when we would expect to see some of these used now.
Foul play, not cool in our books. Foul play has been split into 3 categories: unfair play, unsporting behaviour, and dangerous play. Each attracts increasingly serious game management action. Let's explain them. Unfair play includes delaying play, when a player or team intentionally wastes time or delays play. Intentional infringing, when a player intentionally infringes any rule. Repeated infringing, if a player or team repeatedly infringes a rule or a combination of rules.
Advantage extraction centre, advantage offside centre, advantage offside centre.
Intimidation, when a player with or without the ball attempts to intimidate an opponent using behaviour designed to distract them to obtain an unfair advantage. Examples of intimidation include covering an opponent's eyes, swiping the ball directly in front of their face, making unnecessary loud and sudden noises, stomping the ground, waving arms erratically, or sledging by deliberately insulting or verbally intimidating an opposing player. Disputed ruling, When a player disputes a ruling given by an umpire,
Footwork goal shooter. Oh, what?
if an umpire's call is not clearly heard, a player may ask the umpire to repeat the infringement penalised or seek clarification of where a sanction or action is to be taken. The game management action awarded for unfair play is a penalty pass, which is advanced.
Solid tackle lane play. Advance penalty.
Unsporting behaviour includes retaliation, a player's inappropriate response to the actions of an opponent, even if the opponent
Contact with the team.
abusive behaviour, if a player uses any offensive, insulting or abusive language or gestures towards anyone in the playing enclosure. It also includes any actions contrary to good sporting behaviour. Good sporting behaviour is a level of behaviour that meets generally accepted ethical standards in sport, playing by the rules of the game, self-discipline, self-control and respecting opponents and officials. The game management action for unsporting behaviour is a penalty pass where the infringement occurred and the player is either given a warning or suspended. In a serious case, the umpire will order the player off. Dangerous play. A player must not take any action, either unnecessarily forceful, careless, reckless or dangerous, that could affect the safety of another player. This specifically includes, but is not limited to, any action that results in either head and or neck contact or contact of the head and or neck with any part of the playing enclosure, including the goalpost. In the case of dangerous play, the game management action is a penalty pass where the infringement occurred, and the player is either suspended or, in a serious case, ordered off. A player must always be ordered off for intentional or highly reckless acts of dangerous play.
Goal defence, that's highly reckless, dangerous play. You're ordered off.
There is a big emphasis on the seriousness of dangerous play, which is why it goes straight to a suspension or, in a serious case, ordering off. This puts increased responsibility on players to use good sense and judgment in making decisions on it, and understanding that they will be held accountable for actions that might result in the injury of an opponent. By the time the umpires take the action, the incident has already happened, and it is too late. But having a more serious consequence hopefully has a deterrent effect and makes that player and others reconsider their behaviour for next time.
So again, quite a lot of detail to unpack there. Hopefully that's quite self-explanatory. Nevertheless, we're talking about Rule 19 and the new rules text. Just a couple of points from the previous slide as well in relation to the low level incidents. So proactive advice when that's used, and also for situations where a penalty is either a sanction is either escalated or advanced. Such as for unfair play in this clip. Time does not have to be held, so the umpire can use these game management actions without stopping play. The only time we would expect play to still be held is when a warning has been issued, a player has been suspended, or indeed, in a serious case, being ordered off. In relation to unfair play, one of the areas that was a lot of feedback from members was around kind of explaining in more detail what intimidation consists of. So at Rule 19.6, there is now a list. It's not intended to be exhaustive, but it gives some examples of what we would consider to be intimidation. In relation to dangerous play itself, obviously this is a high impact decision in a match, and umpires need to use accurate and sound judgment. At the same time, we have said that dangerous play specifically includes any instances where there is contact with the head or neck of a player, or contact which causes head or neck contact of the player's head or neck, obviously, with the playing enclosure, including the goalpost. So that's that's not an optional assessment for the umpires. If that incident occurs, the only choice the umpire has to make is whether a player is being suspended or ordered off. And we've provided some guidance as to some factors that should be considered in that assessment. Obviously, it does have a high impact on the outcome of a match potentially, but at the same time, it is a high impact decision on and the consequence on player safety. So some of the things that we've got listed in the rules are, was the act intentional or reckless, or was it avoidable? Was the action at high or low speed, high or low force? Was the player in the air or on the ground, etc.? So we have provided some guidance there to umpires, and we spoke to them at length about this last night. But the key takeout there is if any of these situations occurs, there will be a consequence of, at the minimum, a suspension. So the next couple of slides are going to talk not about rule changes per se, but just refresh and updated clarification. So the feedback that we had from across the board, whether it's coaches, players, or umpires, is that there was a couple of areas that happen frequently in our game that weren't necessarily well understood by all, or perhaps umpires and the playing and coaching fraternity were on slightly different pages. So we have taken the opportunity to refine these further in the rules update. So the first clip is going to be in relation to advantage.
Advantage, or is it? This is not a rule change, but a refresh of the existing rule to make it clear to everyone what umpires consider in making the decision to apply advantage rather than blowing their whistle for an infringement. It is intended to give guidance to umpires, but also educate players and coaches about what is to be considered.
A team should not be disadvantaged when an opponent infringes. If an infringement occurs and the non-infringing team would be disadvantaged by the umpire blowing their whistle, they will refrain and instead call advantage, allowing play to continue. The principles for application of advantage are: the ball should be able to move forward towards the attacking team's goal end. If the ball has moved sideways or backwards, it is because the team in possession have made a tactical choice to do so. They have not been forced to do so by the infringement. The team with the ball should genuinely be able to play it in a way they want to. It should not be under undue pressure as a result of the infringement. To call advantage, the umpire will call advantage and state the infringement and playing position of the infringer. Use the umpire hand signal for advantage.
Final instruction goes to the.
There are some instances where advantage can't be called, including any foul play incident or incidents where an injury has occurred, especially head and neck contact. If the whistle is blown for an infringement, the sanction must be awarded. The only exception is if a goal is scored by a non-infringing team, where the umpire will award the goal, calling advantage and stating the infringement and playing position of the infringer.
Advantage. There you go. We've refreshed the rule to make it clear what umpires are thinking about when calling advantage.
Okay, so that's the advantage refresh in a bit of detail. In terms of key takeouts there from our perspective, the main thing we're wanting to enforce here is that basically for advantage to apply, the ball must be progressed towards the team's goal end, or if they choose to play the ball back, they've chosen to do that for tactical reasons as opposed to being forced to do so. So it's all about emphasizing that a team can play the ball as they wish, not forcing them into an option that they may not like to take. The other thing here was we've clarified specifically when advantage cannot be applied. So that's, for example, when there is an act of foul play or a serious injury. So common sense, but we are saying that in those situations, we need a whistle and the umpires cannot play advantage. Also, a clarification here is it was best practice anyway, but when umpires are calling advantage, they should also be using the playing position initials of the player concerned and not just calling advantage. And the reason for this is that it is still an infringement and we need players to be aware that we're actually calling them for something as opposed to just calling advantage, and nobody actually knowing what's going on. The next rule where we've just made some refinements and clarifications is in relation to contact.
Is netball a non-contact sport? Let's discuss. A key principle of netball is equal contest and the ability of players to compete fairly for playing position and possession of the ball. The contact rule deals with situations where players use physical contact improperly to stop this from happening. This is not a rule change, but a refresh of the existing rule to make it clear to everyone what umpires are looking at to determine whether there has been interference.
The contact rule has three main components. Interference. When attacking, defending, or playing the ball, a player must not engage in physical contact with an opponent that unfairly interferes with the opponent's play, either accidentally or deliberately. Examples include pushing, tripping, grabbing, holding, or leaning on an opponent, knocking or hitting an opponent, including when shooting for goal, hitting or placing their hand or hands on a ball held by an opponent, or while holding the ball, pushing it into an opponent. For physical contact to unfairly interfere, it must result in A, the loss of the ball by an opponent in possession, B, interference with the passing or shooting action of an opponent in possession, or C, a change or changes in the body position of an opponent, regardless of whether the opponent is in possession, which limits their ability to move freely and places them at an unfair disadvantage in attacking, defending, or playing the ball.
Pausing contact has two sections, moving player and player in the air, and this rule has been reworded to make it clearer. Player in the air. A player can jump and land in their own space or any vacant space on court not occupied by another player. A player cannot jump into a stationary opponent. A player cannot move into the landing space of an opponent who has jumped. When two players jump in the air to contest, the player who gains possession has right of way and must be given space to land relative to where the ball was travelling. A player who does not yield the space will be penalised. The moving player rule now states that a player must not take up a position so near to or so quickly in the path of a moving opponent that the opponent does not have enough time or space either to stop or change their direction. The time and distance that must be allowed by the player depends on the speed of the opponent.
Okay, so the contact rule is Rule 17 in the new rules book. And as was explained there, all we've tried to do is provide some further clarity to help everyone involved in our game. Obviously, contact occurs very often, but trying to get an accurate assessment of what is and what isn't interference. I guess the key change here from our perspective is in the previous rules, but we talked a lot about when we talked about interference, we talked about the impact on the player who is getting infringed, not the non-infringing player. So we in the updated text we've focused on both sides. Equally, there has obviously been we've taken the opportunity to clarify the position of what happens when two players contest for the ball in the air, because that wasn't necessarily clear as to who had the right of way. So now if two opponents jump in the air for a ball and one gains possession and the other doesn't, it's the player who gains possession that has the right of way on the land. So we're rewarding the player who gets to that ball and gains possession first. Also in the contact rule, we've put a direct link between contact and the foul play rules. So there are examples specifically where there would be an act of contact that we would consider to be dangerous play. And there's a list there including situations where contact occurs with a player that is already in the air and it impacts on their safe ability to land. So it's all very much common sense, but again, with player safety front and center. Moving on to playing the ball. There is no rule changes here, but it is often something that is confused, especially at a community level. So I'll play you the video. It's just the focus here is on the educational aspect of the existing rules as opposed to any changes. So we've split the rule up to make it a lot clearer about what a player can do before they gain possession and then when they have possession.
Replay ball is one of the most confusing rules in netball. This is not a rule change, but a refresh of the existing rule to make it clear to everyone how you can gain possession of the ball and what you can do while in possession.
To gain possession of the ball, a player may catch the ball with one or both hands, roll the ball to oneself, catch the ball if it rebounds from the goalpost, bat the ball once and then catch it, bounce the ball once and then catch it, or touch the ball in an uncontrolled manner once or more than once and then catch it. A player may not fall on the ball to gain possession, or cane position of the ball while lying, sitting, or kneeling on the ground. If this occurs, the umpire will award a free pass. A player may not use the goalpost as support, including to gain or retain possession of the ball. Any player in possession of the ball may pass it with one or both hands. A goal shooter or goal attack in possession of the ball in the goal circle may either pass the ball or shoot for goal. A player must pass or shoot for goal within 3 seconds. After having possession and releasing the ball, a player may not touch the ball again before it touches another player or it rebounds from the goalpost.
Without having possession of the ball, a player may 1. Bat or bounce the ball to another player. 2. Bat the ball once and then either bat or bounce the ball to another player. 3. Bounce the ball once and then either bat or bounce the ball to another player. 4. Touch the ball in an uncontrolled manner once or more than once and then either bat or bounce the ball to another player. There are other ways of playing the ball that are prohibited in netball. A player may not 1. Kick the ball. 2. Strike the ball with a fist. 3. Roll the ball to another player. 4. Pass the ball or shoot for goal while lying, sitting or kneeling on the ground. This should make it easier to interpret the rules for playing the ball.
So all of the rules in relation to playing the ball are now in Rule 11 in the new rules text. As was probably quite clear in those videos, just a change in distinction is hopefully going to aid some understanding here. A lot of the confusion in relation to this rule actually came back to the terminology that umpires were using to penalise an infringement. So we've now drawn a line in the sand between what we are now going to be calling repossession, i.e. a player has had possession of the ball, lost it, and regained possession of the ball. So umpires should be calling that repossession, and it has its own hand signal, which is what used to be the hand signal for replay ball. And then the situations where there's bats and bounces and catches, etc., that will now be called replayed ball. So the situation where you have had possession, lose it, and regain possession, that is repossession, not to be confused with replay ball. And then replayed ball is for the other instances. So hopefully with this distinction, we should be getting more consistency and understanding around playing the ball or incorrectly playing the ball. Save the shortest video clip to last. Throw in.
Waiting for everyone to be on court for the throw-in? Not anymore. If you're ready to take a throw-in, you don't have to wait for everyone to be on the court. Just like any other sanction, the player taking a throw-in can play the ball as soon as they are in position without waiting, even if everyone is not on the court.
But don't forget, you can't have your toe on the line while taking a throw-in, and you need to be within 15 centimetres of the line. The previous rule was difficult for umpires to apply because players may move off court to reposition, and also we want to speed up the game and ensure momentum isn't lost.
So this is quite a simple change. It reflects the fact that in cases of throw-ins, we were treating it quite differently to other sanctions or actions in the case that players couldn't play the ball immediately. There's often also the consideration of whether a team is delaying play to try and effectively win a penalty. So now by removing this, hopefully we will speed the game up because the team that will have the throw-in will go and get the ball. And if the other player is off the court, then play will just continue. So it's one less thing for the umpires to worry about. Obviously, they still need to be aware of where the player is located when they throw the ball in, that they're either not on the line or too far away from it. But that's quite a straightforward change and should be quite welcome across the levels. I'll give you a rest from my dulcet tones now and hand back to Cheryl.
Great job, Jono. Thank you very much. I think the videos really aid understanding, so thank you. So briefly now, we're getting towards the end of our rules presentation, then we'll move on to Felicity presenting on the technical official changes. But rule obstruction, We've all seen that there's something called the lift that's been introduced into our sport. We've seen it numerous times, sometimes done effectively and sometimes not quite so effectively. But we've now clarified within the rule that you are allowed to lift a player within your own team. But the player that's lifting and the player being lifted need to be 3 feet away from the player with the ball, and they must not interfere with the player in possession of the ball. So clarity there in relation to both the lifted player and the player doing the lifting. During the last 4 years, we have had some questions come in about when a player pivots. So the example I will give is a goal attack, receives the ball inside the goal circle, facing out towards the court, and the defending player takes up their defending position 3 feet away from the player with the ball. As the goal attack turns, her foot turns, and so her foot is closer to the defending player. That defending player must readjust their defending position to move to be 3 feet away from the nearest part of the foot of the goal attack. So that is clarification of something that was a little bit ambiguous in the previous rules. Obstruction of a player without the ball. We've changed the wording. We've changed the word possible movement to prevent. So the rule now reads, rule 16.8, a player who is within 3 feet of an opponent not in possession of the ball may not, whether attacking or defending, use movements that take arms away from the body to prevent the movement of an opponent, except as required for natural body stance. And the reason we did this was we felt that that would be easier for umpires to interpret, but also clearer for players, that it's not possible movement, it's movement that prevents an opponent moving. So just to go through briefly some other changes, the late player rule has been streamlined and simplified and brought more in line with failure to take the court. So it was quite complex and clunky, and now that has been streamlined. We also had a number of different whistles specified, whistle types in the previous rules. Some of those created confusion, so we've now simplified this, and we don't believe we needed all those different types of whistles. We've also clarified, to be clear here, the rare times an umpire should call taken. As we looked at other matches and videos, quite often you could hear umpires keep saying taken, 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 or yes, yes, yes. If the umpire is signaling clearly and the sanction is set, there should be no reason to keep calling taken unless there is total confusion, in which case the umpire could say taken, but that would be very, very rarely. The other thing that we've clarified is when an umpire should be holding time. For instance, when the ball leaves the playing enclosure. Often in our matches now, we have another ball which comes straight on the court, so there's no need to hold the ball and when it leaves the playing enclosure, unless there will be a loss of time. So again, we're asking umpires to hold time sparingly for things that happen outside of the court. The duties for the reserve umpire have been expanded and now include, and I think Jono mentioned this earlier, that they signal the centre pass. This is to try to prevent incorrect centre passes being taken. So we have a number of people now indicating and checking. The reserve umpire also supervises an order off player for the 4 minutes and advises them when the 4-minute time has elapsed. They check any late players who haven't been checked, who haven't been in the match previously. And they advise the umpires if the independent concussion observer or primary carer person wishes to stop play to facilitate the substitution of any on-court player due to a suspected concussion. So quite a lot of responsibility now in relation to the reserve umpire. The other one, which is a change that we had a number of members write into us about, was in relation to the offside rule. So the offside rule hasn't been changed, with the exception of the following. A player can enter an offside area to retrieve a ball to set a sanction or action. So that player that is going to take the sanction or action may go into an offside area, retrieve the ball, come straight back out and take the sanction or action. We've also updated the rule in relation to jury and adornments. Again, we had a number of questions submitted to the Rules Advisory Panel asking why, for example, players were allowed to wear a wedding ring as long as it was taped, but they couldn't wear other items of jewellery. We've clarified this in the updated jury and adornments rule, but I would just stress that anything that anybody is wearing, whether that is a medical aid, jewelry, adornments, any other thing that players are wearing must not be a potential risk to any other player and must be covered. The duties for the technical officials and event organisers has been updated, and now within the rules book you will see a list of responsibilities relating to the event organiser pre the match and during the match. And we have added a number of new definitions, as I mentioned earlier, at the front of the rules book. These really they're worth studying because they do help you to understand the rules and they support your understanding of the rules. So please have a look at those and read carefully, particularly the umpires. And you will also notice in the new rules book that we no longer have any appendices. We've removed the match guidelines and absorbed these into the rules. And also you will see that the terminology to be used has been actually added beneath each rule. So each rule will have the rule, the sanction, followed by the terminology. Thanks, Johnny. And then finally, updated hand signals in relation to the rules book. We now have a hand signal, as Johnny mentioned, for possession, which is hands, palms inward, a short distance apart in a catching motion, which is really meant to symbolize the catching of a ball. We have the incorrect position or incorrect use of court areas. Now, this covers a number of infringements. This is covering offside, breaking, over a third, untouched centre pass, not sent, preventing re-entry, defending from out of court, leaving the court, incorrect throw-in and incorrect shot. All of these are grouped together under the same hand signal, incorrect position or incorrect use of court areas. The interference with a shot or intimidation signal. Previously, it was just intimidation. Now the same signal is used for interference with the shot. The tactical change, we went into some detail earlier on. We showed you that in the video, which is the circular motion of both forearms around each other, but above the waist so it can be seen. Jono talked through the repossession, hands, palms inwards, a short distance apart, twist from side to side in a parallel motion. And then the incorrect playing the ball is also for playing the ball on the ground, using the goalpost and replayed ball. And that is a hand going up and down in a bouncing action. So we've now differentiated repossession from incorrect playing of the ball. Onto our rollout plan. We're running this webinar series to all World Netball officials, members and media, as I mentioned previously. We're providing education resources with video clips summarising the key changes in their application. And you will see here, there's a small diagram showing tactical changes. We've produced a number of small documents which will be published over the next few weeks by World Netball through their digital campaign. So World Netball, in conjunction with NetFit, will start to share these PDFs so we can increase awareness and also hope to standardise implementation of the rules across the world. And we wanted one single source of interpretation. So we wanted these one-on-one webinars and the use of the PDFs and videos so we get the same message across the whole of our netball world. In early 2024, all ranking matches will be played to the international rules, so from the 1st of January. So we have started upskilling the teams that are participating as well as the officials taking part. That started this month and will carry on during the early part of 2024. The rules app, which I hope you will have on your mobile, will go live on the 1st of January with the updated rules, and Jono is leading on that. If you do have any questions, for those of you that are attending this webinar, if you don't have a chance to ask your question at the end of this session, then please submit your rules questions directly to myself, and I will consult with RAP to try and get the answer. And we will then collate all of the questions and answers and provide a frequently asked question document. Normally, your query should go through your home country. So, you know, as we move into next year, then please go back to the formal process of sending your query to your rules to your member country. But immediately following this session, if you have any questions, please submit them directly to World Netball so they come back to myself and RAP. We've also provided a list of changes comparing the 2020 rules wording with the 2024 amended wording. So that is in circulation. And during the coming year, we will be gathering information from elite competitions in relation to the implementation of the short pass, any concerns, any issues, and also the possession rule, the removal of the toss-up, just to monitor how those two rules are going. Are they causing any problems? And it may be that in relation to the short pass rule, if there are issues, we could perhaps, well, we could issue an updated rule at the beginning of 2025. Further rules trials that we will be looking at, and we're looking for volunteers here, is to undertake a trial of a different division of court for umpires' responsibilities. Now, again, that's quite challenging to do because you have to decide, you know, how you're going to manage that and how you're going to monitor it. But if we have volunteers, please speak up. We have one already. And we will also be looking at trialing the use of technologies, particularly between umpires and the technical official bench. And then finally, we have now got agreement that a member of RAP can attend all 2024 major international series, and that is to support the umpires and the umpire appointments panel in relation to the implementation of the rules. So you would see perhaps one of us floating around at various events. And now I'm going to go on to hand over to Felicity, who's going to take us through the changes to the technical officials manual. Thank you, Felicity.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so the main changes to the technical officials manual. We have, as a World Netball technical officials group, looked at the whole of the manual and all of the forms, and the official match record will continue to be the World Netball score sheet and the player, and a new sheet called the player changes and game management form, which you have to complete for each team. That should be sent to World Netball. We have made some small some amendments to the World Netball score sheet as well, but we'll come on to that in later slides. There's now an option that's been added in to include player ID numbers that could be different from country to country. So it's not stipulated on how countries manage that, but all their player names and numbers should match on the uniform, should match the score sheet and ID numbers provided, and should be able for us to be able to see on the bench, which should hopefully make it a lot easier for identification of errors should they occur. There's no longer a requirement to record a penalty on an attempt of shot or a goal, so that removes some of the elements, so it's only an in or an out going forwards. We've changed the order on the score sheet to be scored then attempted, which should make the calculation of percentages a little bit more logical. We've removed the requirement for the technical officials to initial the score sheet at the end, mainly because that wasn't being done consistently, and a lot of the technical officials were just signing it because they were told to sign it rather than actually performing the check that that initialing was supposed to be recording. The requirement to have carbon copies in triplicate has been removed. Countries can still choose to do that, but it's not required due to the fact that a lot of countries are now sending results sheets via the use of photographs and scanned copies. And the changes we've made reflects the use of the modified templates into the manual. Next slide, please. Okay, so the main changes to the template, as you can see, we've made some reasonable changes to the World Netball score sheet. It includes a section to add additional technical officials where they're used. So, for example, statisticians or the bench managers can be recorded on the score sheet. It requires you to identify player positions at the start of the quarter. Any substitutions will now be recorded on the player changes and game management form, which we'll come on to in a minute. And the shooting statistics, the extra shooting statistics form that we used to do is no longer required because we've actually incorporated that into the main sheet. The only changes that we've made to template B, which is the running score sheet used by scorer 2, is that we've just increased the number of lines because we found that a lot of the time we were running out of lines due to the fact that there were more goals scored because the game's moved on and got a little bit faster. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the player changes in game management form, which is a new form. It incorporates the stoppages, the team lists, the start of the quarter game management, and game management all into one form. So all of the discipline for both the bench and for the on-court players will be recorded on one of these forms. There'll be 2 forms per match, one for each team. The time left in the quarter when a player change is made doesn't have to be recorded, but can be if the regulations of the competition require it. Both options are actually covered in the manual. The option to include a player ID number and name has been included on template D, which is the start team list, and onto template E, which is the team changes form. So all of those are now streamlined across all of the paperwork. Next slide, please. So the removal of the visual stoppage sign, which there weren't many competitions still using, which is the U on the paddle. That picture's been removed from the visual indicators appendix. That's the only change there. The additional technical officials changes have been made to reflect the changes that have been made in the technical officials manual, and the changes made to reflect the score sheet section. So the appendix 3 shows which zone things relate to in the manual. That's also been updated to reflect the changes that have been made.